Morning. Good morning. I'd like to call the Kankakee County Board meeting for December 13th to order. Today's invocation is from Todd Seroy.
First, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in remembrance of Mr. Africano, our treasurer's mother, who's just passed away. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the fine men and women who have gathered here today. We ask that you bestow your blessings upon this meeting. We ask that you give us insight, knowledge, and trust to come together as one for the good of our county. Father, be with and protect all of our emergency personnel, firemen, police, in their daily duties. Also protect and comfort our military and their family with their sacrifices they go through to protect our great land. Lastly, Father, I ask that you guard and protect our nation's school buses and drivers so that they can reach their destinations safely every day. In your name we pray, Father. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Get a roll call, please.
Mr. Hess. Present. Mr. Tholen.
Present.
Mrs. Polk.
Present.
Mr. Snipes.
Present.
Mr. Seroy.
Present.
Mrs. Weber.
Present.
Mrs. Parker.
Present.
Mr. Fairfield.
Present.
Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff.
Present.
Mr. Swanson. Mr. Featherling.
Present.
Mr. Dunnell.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Long.
Present.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Present.
Mr. Hunter. Mr. Smith.
Present.
Mr. Alexander Hildebrand.
Present.
Ms. Foster.
Present.
Ms. Andrade.
Present.
Ms. Armour Earps. Mr. Ashcraft.
Present.
Ms. Monday.
Present.
Ms. Ripmanick Emmy.
Present.
Mr. Scanlon.
Present.
Ms. Turner.
Present.
Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Since this is a new board, can I get a motion and a second to approve Evergreen for the next 2 years? Dr. Polk's attendance remotely. Mr. Eckhoff, Mr. Smith, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. I have no public comment requests in front. Thing in the back. All right. Vacancy appointments. We have a couple of things. The first thing, if we could get the title read in. Let's wait on this. Sheriff Downey, I'm sorry. Did you want to come up, please? Sheriff had a presentation that he wanted to make, and Kelly's going to get ready with some video, but I want to bring a couple of correctional officers with.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't tell you how proud I am to do what we're about to do today and honor these three individuals up here, and I will introduce them. I will introduce them by length of service instead of others. So, Correctional Officer Jacqueline Harkar, Correctional Officer Damian Maldonado, and Correctional Officer Cameron Douglas. Officer Harkar has been with the department almost 15 years. Officer Maldonado has been here just over 3, and Cameron Douglas has been here slightly over 1. And we don't do this very often, and we should probably do it a little more, because a lot of things that we see or that we see out in the public are normally things that don't look well for law enforcement, and we always hear about the bad things, but we never hear about the good things. And I think it's important to recognize what our staff does on a daily basis, and what you're about to see shows the professionalism, the dedication, and the hard work and the caring that these officers have for the job that they do. So I'll set this up a little bit. For those of you that have not been in our facility, and I would encourage those who have not to come in and take a look and tour, but this is one of the housing units that has a second tier. And so you can tell that there are cells on the main floor and then cells on the second tier. There's an individual up there in orange, and we redacted his identity for his privacy. And what he has in his hand is a sheet that he's attempting to tie around that railing. And you'll see what happens to him. And just so we're clear, there may be those who find this video offensive or graphic. And if you do, I would just suggest you turn away. But if you would go ahead and hit play. So you can see he's trying to tie that rope, and Officer Maldonado's coming up the stairs, trying to stop him from jumping off that tier and hanging himself. And Officer Harkar is coming up to get his legs out, get his legs from dangling. They do a great job. That's it. So credit to them for the job they did. That could have ended in tragedy for not only that individual, but for everybody, because in spite of what people think, our staff does care about the treatment of those who are in our custody. And these three obviously exemplify the professionalism that we certainly want with the Sheriff's Office. So what we have for them, we have a certificate, we have a letter of commendation, and I hate to bring up the supply chain, but we also have life-saving pins that are held up because of the supply chain, but they will have life-saving pins that they'll be able to wear on their uniform, identifying them as heroes. So I'll read this real quick. My arms aren't long enough. This certificate is hereby given as a testimonial in recognition of interest taken, cooperation rendered, and valuable services performed in the interest of protecting and assisting the lives and property of our community. In witness whereof, the aforementioned office of the Sheriff of Kankakee County has caused the certificate to be signed on this date, the 13th of December, 2022. And this one goes to Officer Harkar. Officer Maldonado, and in addition to this today, it's also Officer Maldonado's 33rd birthday. So, where do you want me? No, just get them. Yep, they're the heroes.
Thank you. Wow. Moving on to the next item, I'd like to see if Dan could read this into the record, please, in its entirety.
Proclamation of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, honoring Joe Franco, inaugural recipient of the Economic Alliance Impact Award. Whereas Joe Franco first came to Kankakee at the age of 23 to work in the medical lab for St. Mary's Hospital. And whereas Joe Franco built his own medical lab, including facilities in Kankakee, Bourbonnais, Manteno, and Momence. And whereas Joe Franco has been instrumental in the completion of over 30 projects in Kankakee County and throughout the region, including Bourbonnais Med Center, Heritage Med Center, Olivet Nazarene University Graduate Administration Building, and the Executive Center in Kankakee. And whereas Joe Franco was the trailblazer in renovating the David Bradley Building in Bradley as a business incubator, and whereas Joe Franco has developed the John Deere Building in the Quad Cities, the Super Block in East Moline, the bridge connecting Ascension St. Mary's to the Med Center West, and whereas Joe Franco was instrumental in forming the Unified Kankakee County Community Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Alliance of Kankakee, and whereas Joe Franco has been named the inaugural recipient of the Economic Alliance of Kankakee's Impact Award. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Kankakee County Board greatly appreciates the many contributions to the skyline and fabric of Kankakee County, and proclaims December 13th, 2022 as Joe Franco Day in Kankakee County, Illinois.
Thank you. Can I get a motion on that first to start off with? We'll go with Mr. Hunter and a second with Mr. Tholen.
I do that because my dad worked for him way back in the day.
Mr. Hunter said he made the motion for the fact that his dad worked for you way back in the day. So I don't know if you heard that. I would say that I know a few people that have had more of an impact on this community than Joe Franco, and I certainly appreciate what he's done. Pulling together the economic development initiative into a cohesive unit, forming the alliance with the county as a partner has been, we retain employers like no other. We were very good at that, and that's a primary focus, but we also have a cohesive unit moving forward in the community as a one-stop shop for economic development. And that is by no accident. It's through the intent and design of Mr. Franco and those folks who started the Economic Alliance. And that's why it still survives and is functioning at a high level today. So with that, can I get a motion? We have a motion in a second. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, Joe. And please come up and meet me up here, and I'll give you this plaque here in the front. Sir, thank you again for everything. Very much appreciated. You have anything to say to the group?
You've heard enough already. You don't need to hear anymore. But thank you all.
Your turn. Thanks, Joe. Take care. Oh, okay. All right, next item on the agenda. The certificates of appreciation. Cynthia Van Witzenberg from the Circuit Clerk's office here today. No? Appreciate your service. The minutes of the last meeting, November 9th, 2022. Is there a motion on minutes? Ms. Parker, Mr. Scanlon, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We're going to skip the next item and circle back. Kelly went to grab something related to that. So if we can do department reports.
Sure. Do you want a motion second first, or read them first?
Yeah, go ahead and read them first. Yeah.
County Collector's Monthly Report for October 2022. Total cash and bank and investments of $756,538.81. County Treasurer's Monthly Report for October 2022. The tax operating account at First American Bank, ending balance of $623,716.65. The tax collection account for First American Bank, ending balance of $337.85. The tax e-pay account for First American Bank, ending balance of $84,860.76. Illinois funds at U.S. Bank, the ending balance of $47,623.55. Coroner's monthly report for October 2022, total calls 109, coroner's cases 21, 8 autopsies, 8 toxicology, 2 fetal, 41 hospice, 45 referrals, 73 cremations, 2 x-rays, and 7 pending. Coroner's income summary report for October 2022, total of $4,714.44. Circuit clerk cash book for October 2022, total dispersed of $275,675.22. Recorder's monthly report for October 2022, disbursement fees paid to the county treasurer of $125,905.10. County clerk's monthly report for October 2022, total of $22,654.78. The county monthly building division report for October 2022, 101 total permits, total fees of $34,700. The animal control monthly report for October 2022, total of $47,222. The IPTIP building fund, $174.54. Total animals handled, 92. And the county monthly resolution list for December 2022, total to the county of $278,621.49.
All righty, is there a motion to approve there? Mr. Eckloff, a second with Dr. Polk. That's a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we'll circle back to Claims Committee, please.
Mr. Chairman, the county has approved the following claims, a total of $8,816,585.98.
All righty, is there a motion on that to approve? Mr. Long, Mr. Dunhill with a second. It's got to be a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes. Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Kirko.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Dunhill.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hutter. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Ms. Foster. Ms. Andrade.
Aye.
Mr. Ashcraft.
Aye.
Ms. Monday.
Aye.
Ms. Ripmanick Emmy.
Aye.
Mr. Scanlon.
Aye.
Ms. Turner.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to consent agenda. Is there any one of those that needs to be removed and considered separately? And we'll ask a second time, is there anything that needs to be removed, considered independently of the rest of the consent agenda? Well, with that, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda with Fairfield, Parker, with a second. If we get those read in the record, please.
The appointment of Stephen D. Schultz to the Limestone Fire Protection District. The reappointment of Jason Munyon to the Momence Pembroke Union Drainage District Number 1. Declaration and disposal of surplus equipment for the Kankakee County State's Attorney's Office. Declaration and disposal of surplus equipment for the Kankakee County Sheriff's Department. Amending Chapter 2, Article 2, Section 2-475, Appointment Policy and Procedure of the Kankakee County Code. Amending Chapter 2, Article 2, Section 2-62, Committees Generally of the Kankakee County Code. ZBA Case 22-17, Request for a Variance to Sections 121-281.c, Setbacks for Pond, in Section 15 of Aroma Township. ZBA Case 22-18, Request for rezoning from A1 Agriculture District to A2 Agriculture District in Section 9 of Salina Township. Authorizing the county board chairman or his designee to enter into intergovernmental agreements with municipalities in Kankakee County, Illinois to conduct an electronics recycling program. Reauthorizing the county board chairman to sign an agreement with the Economic Alliance. General fund interborrowing authorization until November 30th, 2023. Amending resolution number 2022-05-10-88 regarding setting the salary for the Kankakee County clerk. amending Resolution 2022-05-10-89 regarding setting the salary for the Kankakee County Treasurer.
Thank you. Just as a informational, I found a couple of typos. One was on the amendment of the Article 2, Section 2-475, and it said shall hold without an H on the front. It should be hold. Fix that. And then I also noticed a reference to the former president and CEO of the Economic Alliance also being the planning director in there. We're going to strike that one sentence because it doesn't apply anymore. But besides that, I just want to make sure that it was known. I found that when I was looking through it after it was on the consent agenda. So if you want to know that specific line, but it just references Mr. Van Mill, who used to be our planning director and also the president and CEO. That doesn't exist anymore. So beyond those two changes, that's what we were approving here. I wanted to mention that. So if that's okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes. Mr. Seroy. Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Andrade.
Aye.
Mr. Ashcraft.
Aye.
Ms. Monday.
Aye.
Ms. Rittmanick-Emmy.
Aye.
Mr. Scanlon.
Aye.
Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Under Highway and Buildings, if we can get the title read in the record, that's quite a title.
Resolution authorizing the county board chairman to sign an agreement to reimburse certain costs related to the Heritage Prairie Solar and Winds project between the county of Kankakee and Heritage Prairie Solar LLC, Illinois Generation LLC.
Is there a motion to approve on this one? Start off with Mr. Long, second. Mr. Hunter? Oh, okay. Mr. Ashcraft, was that? Okay. Sorry. Thought this was a this. Sorry. Any explanation needed on that? Any questions? Basically, the petitioners, the solar and wind farm people pay for this lawyer to handle this piece of business. So that's part of what they have to do. These are very complex agreements, and I think everybody concerned was better to get a professional on it than bog down our state's attorney's office. Not like they're not professionals. This is a little bit different. Sorry about the backhanded compliment. So we have a motion, a second. That'll, without questions, roll call vote. Okay.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Andrade.
Aye.
Mr. Ashcraft.
Aye.
Ms. Monday.
Aye.
Ms. Rittmanick-Emmy.
Aye.
Mr. Scanlon.
Aye.
Ms. Turner.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. The second item, please, if we can get that read in the record.
Resolution appropriating funds for the payment of the county engineer salary.
And that number is in the packet, $134,100 from the county's county motor fuel tax from 1/1/23 to 12/31/23. So is there, do we have motions on that? Is there a motion to approve there? Mr. Hess, Mr. Carrico with a second. Any questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Ms. Foster. Ms. Andrade.
Aye.
Mr. Ashcraft.
Aye.
Ms. Monday.
Aye.
Ms. Rittmanick-Emmy.
Aye.
Mr. Scanlon.
Aye.
Ms. Turner.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Under Executive Committee, we can get the, oh, excuse me, PZA first. I already checked it off. If we could read the title, and then Delbert will throw the picture back up for those board members who weren't here for finance.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding emergency demolition for violation of Section 108 unsafe structure of the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code for property located at 130 South Laurel Road, Kankakee, Illinois.
Is there a motion to approve to start off with? Ms. Parker, second, Mr. Featherling. Dell?
Yes. Morning. Excuse me. We are asking for an amount not to exceed $20,000 for the demolition of this property at 130 Laurel Road. Back in October, we had gotten a call from neighbors that said they were concerned that the house was going to collapse and people were living in it. We went out and looked at it, and that's the condition. In fact, the roof has actually sank a little bit more since that time. Discussions with the state's attorney's office. We posted a notice on there according to law. Nobody contacted us on that. Since that time, whoever was living in there has not been found. We have not seen them there since. So it's pretty much abandoned. Rumor has it that the person who does own it is deceased. It did get sold for back taxes back in November. So we will be going to a judge to ask for an emergency order of demolition. We do have it should be in your packet, a quote from A&R Tree and Demo for around $15,000 plus another $800 for to reestablish seed on the site and level the grade back out. You can see the pictures. The roof is caving in, which is causing the walls to bow out. There's a lot of other damage elsewhere. We're not even sure that this house has a foundation underneath it. So that is what we are asking for today.
So I believe in the previous meeting, Dell mentioned that, you know, they can't even really get in there to do an asbestos inspection to see if there's any asbestos in there. So there may be more cost coming with this based on how they're going to figure out how they're going to do this, because you really shouldn't even walk in that house with the walls blowing out and the roof falling in. So hopefully this is the last we'll hear of it once we get it down, but you may see it come back for asbestos remediation.
Frankly, we were afraid to knock on the door. We were there with two sheriff's officers, and even they didn't want to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting how you could see the blue sky through the gap of the roof and the top of the house.
Looking in the windows, the interior ceiling has caved in. There's holes in the floor. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
So any other questions about this? The process is we got to go in front of a judge. So it's going to be, he's working on it. Mr. Snipes.
Though I see the dilapidation, and I probably agree that it needs to be deteriorated, I also believe in making sure that we protect the rights of those individuals who do own it. And I basically heard you say that you reached out, but there's been no response. However, the only caveat or the carrot that's hanging is the fact that it went to sale. Did someone purchase it, or they did not purchase it? So that way when we go, because other than that, have we contacted the person who purchased it?
They purchased the taxes. We are working with the state's attorney's office to follow all aspects of the law under these circumstances.
Okay, so that it would be premature to, I guess we can only approve pending the outcome of the judge as to, because if that other person comes up and say, I want to rehab it, and they fight it, then it negates what we're doing here today. So it will be pending the outcome of the judge's decision in reference to this property at 130 South Laurel.
Well, yeah, it needs to be demolished, and we will be asking a judge to do so. We did not want to go and ask that question without funds to back up the demolition. So what we're asking for today is the funds.
Right. So would it be safe to say that the motion would be to pending the outcome? Because the thing is that when someone purchased that, actually there has to be some type of legal maneuvering in order to get that individual to say, I have no interest or whatever. We just can't go in and tear it down because someone's taking it.
The process would be, we'll be filing a motion for an emergency demolition. We would give notice to any owners of record. If somebody purchased the taxes, they purchased the lien on the taxes. That does not mean that they are the owners of the property. There's a whole process that has to go forward in order to, after you purchase taxes, to at some point getting a tax deed. So we will be giving notices to everybody that's appropriate, and then when we get before the judge, then the judge will then enter the order, and that will cover all the bases that you're inquiring about.
All right, okay, so this is pending the judge's decision.
Right.
Right.
You
That's
need
what
an
I just
order
want the
from the
motion to
judge.
reflect,
Right.
pending the judge's decision. Thanks.
Well, I don't think the county would pay the money until it was demolished, and it's not going to be demolished.
Just want to safeguard it, that's all.
Any other thoughts? We have a motion and a second. All right. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy. Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Parker. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra. Mr. Hunter. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Foster. Ms. Andrade. Mr. Ashcraft. Mr. Monday. Ms. Monday. Ms. Rittman-McEmmey. Mr. Scanlon. Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. All righty. Next item. That's the Belson agreement for executive. You can get that read.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, the authorization of the Kankakee County Board Chairman to execute an agreement with Belson Steel Center of Bradley to provide an e-waste recycling location and services.
All righty. If I can get a motion to approve there, Mr. Featherling, second. Ms. Foster. Basically same terms, everything is still the same. Just the breakout of what each partner is going to pay is changed a little bit based on the tonnage we saw the first year. So the first year and a half. We did an agreement for 2 years. Where's all the electronic waste coming from? And then we divided it up based on that. Ben can speak to that if you need him to, but I was looking for the sheet that had the breakdown of the costs in here. I don't see it, but it might be on your pads over there. But it's still correct, and the amount that we are going to allocate is still the same coming from us. It's just the division between the municipal partners has changed. Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so it's kind of two pieces to this. So under the consent agenda, the board authorized that execution of intergovernmental agreements with the jurisdictions involved, and that's kind of how we do our pro rata based on tonnage collected. And then we, once have a program up and running, which we do, we need somebody to take the waste, collect it, sort it, follow all the rules. And our partner Belson's has been doing a fantastic job. So we're requesting the ability to continue that contract moving forward, affording our residents a place to bring their e-waste. And because we have a recycling partner, potentially if you bring your other waste, you can make a little money in the process. So
it's worked out very well. The e-waste is coming from all over the county. Hopefully we're seeing less and less of it in the ditches. That's an ultimate goal here, is to keep it out of those rural areas, and I think it has an impact. Especially since you can get paid for some of that stuff. That's also nice, to do the right thing and get paid for it. So we had a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy. Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Parker. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra. Mr. Hunter. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Foster. Ms. Andrade. Mr. Ashcraft. Ms. Monday. Ms. Rittman-McEmmey. Mr. Scanlon. Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. The next item, tax levy. If we read the title, I guess that's what it is. Yeah.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County for the tax year 2022 levy request.
Start off with a motion on that first for the tax levy request. Ms. Weber, second.
Polk.
Dr. Polk with a second. So you see the levy request there. We have a sharp decline in the amount that we have to contribute to IMRF because the fund is performing so well, I guess. That's in order to keep up with that. We had a 7% drop. We can go into the mechanisms of that in the next finance committee meeting, but this is based on how well their investments were doing up until obviously the turn last year. So I don't think we're going to see a 7% going forward negative. I think it's going to be an increase going back in there based on what we're seeing with the economy and inflation. Also, you'll note the 6.1% increase over last year for the veterans, the VAC, and the bonds and interest. Basically, that's where our tax cuts are at. So you see we dropped that by 11.5% because we're going to pick that up instead of the taxpayers picking that up. It's going to come out of the general fund. So we're paying off those bonds early, and that's how that's represented, which is in the tax levy. So there's your evidence that it's happened. So we approved that. That's the other piece that we needed to approve in order to let those tax cuts survive. I also put in there, because it's been called a question, this administration, what we've done as far as the tax levy. So if you look at starting tax year 2017, collected in 2018 through today, it's an average of 2.92% per year. So that other number that was floated out there is wildly inaccurate, what we've done since this administration's been here. And what that means on a $150,000 home, the levy that you're seeing in front of you, basically the multiplier is going down, the tax multiplier is going down, but with the increased EAV, we're still looking at about a 1.98% increase, which on a $150,000 house is less than $1 a month, and that allows us to cover off the increase in the labor contracts, as you've seen, the 2.5%. So we have to account for that somewhere. It's just not nebulous money. That's basically the only increases that we're asking for, is to cover off those labor agreements. So is there any questions about all of that? These are connected to our budget. They're just done at different points. Steve's here to answer questions, obviously, Anita, myself. We're doing pretty good to hold this down. You know, we're giving money back to the taxpayers. I think that should be noted. We're just not sitting on piles of cash. We're giving it back. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy. Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Parker. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Dunhill. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra. Mr. Hunter. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Foster. Ms. Andrade. Mr. Ashcraft. Ms. Monday. Ms. Rittman-McEmmey. Mr. Scanlon. Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next one, title and record, please. A lot of business today.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, authorization of County Board Chairman to sign an agreement with Tyler Technologies for the case management system.
Is there a motion to start off with? Mr. Hess, Ms. Parker with a second. I don't know how, if we went through this in the Finance Committee meeting, but I will lay it out here. What you see in your packet is the totals for what it will cost us to upgrade our system into something that is from this century, I will say. It's been a long process. We evaluated many vendors. We had through an RFQ process, we had some, I think 5 or 6 submit something. We chose 2 that seemed like they were viable options for us. A third would have been a viable option, but it was so expensive that couldn't even consider it. And they had nobody in the state of Illinois as a customer. So that's one of the issues that we had with our current system, is we are the only one in the state of Illinois who uses that vendor. And so anytime the state would come up with a new law or some type of a new thing that involved the court system, we'd have to carry all the cost of upgrading that computer system instead of dividing up amongst other counties. The system we have now, or the one that we're proposing, is from a company called Tyler. And we already use one of their products. It's called New World. All of the arresting agencies have it. In the police, in the county, the police force in the county, 911 uses it. The sheriff's department is on it. Well, Tyler also, this is the bid for their version of the court software, so everything is integrated together. It reduces the double entry, printing something out and then putting it in another computer system. Everything will be tied together. This is a tool not only to run the current courts, but also to drive efficiencies out of the courthouse, which is absolutely the only way that we can keep up with the attack on our revenues out of the courthouse that all these new laws from Springfield are thrusting upon the local taxpayer. If the money is not there for the people that are committing the crimes to have to pay for those services out of the courthouse, that falls to the property tax owners. So we have to drive efficiency in order to lessen that burden. That's just a fact. And it's going to happen over the next 10 years. And then going forward, the cost of moving paper is not a cost that we can pay anymore. So in this case, everything's being scanned, put in the system, total digital presence, freeing up room in the courthouse. This system here, we're going to host on site. It's been a long process. There's board members, Mr. Long, Mr. Fairfield were part of it. Anita's been part of the group. All the court departments are on board. This is the solution they want, and we are asking, it's the total ticket price for the first 2 years of maintenance, the cost of the systems, all of the licensing, the infrastructure that we need to host it here, the servers, is 3.2 million is what our not to exceed number is that we're asking for. The system itself is about 2.6, and then the couple of years of maintenance that we're using ARPA funds for. So all of this is being paid for with the ARPA revenue, the COVID money as other people call it. So this is not locally taxpayer supported, but going forward, the maintenance will be, which is, you see the maintenance line, it's around 200,000 a year, and it will surely go up over time. But we should be driving efficiencies to drive costs out of the court system at the same time. So know that the financial projections, Steve has run them, we've all looked at them. This is an affordable system. It's not even a Cadillac, it's more like a Porsche as far as these types of computer systems go. Text messages for the public to say, hey, don't forget your court date. I mean, that's simple public facing things, but the back end of it, there's no more jumping in and out of different computer systems. It'll all be on one platform. So that's highly, highly important to the way we operate our courts, or should I say the way they operate their courts. We don't operate, we just fund. So indirectly, we have a horse in the race. We have to fund it. So is there any questions about this? It's really technical, and we'll try to get all the questions answered, but by us doing this before the end of the year, we're able to enjoy some significant savings, cost savings, and that's why we put it on this agenda, because we already knew that, or on the finance meeting before this, because if we get it in before the end of the year, there is some other savings that were afforded. Mr. Hunter.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. You indicated that the implementation will be 2024. Let me ask you this, with respect to training, can you speak to that in terms of implementation?
Yeah, that's all part of the training. That's one of the lines in here. It's it designates, I want to say, $88,000 towards training, but also we are dedicating somebody from our IT staff to the courts and to be the, I'll say, Tyler whisperer, if you will, to know everything inside and out. We're not going to be held at, we're not going to have the system that does all of this stuff and not take advantage of it and not have cohesion between all these departments, whether it's public defender, probation. And I forgot to mention this will connect to probation as well. And so end to end, from the arrest or from the beginning of the civil case through the disposition, the quashing of the warrant or the enforcement of the warrant, it's all going to be connected and seamless.
So Mr. Duval's shop will...
Yeah, he is. It's going to be Jason is who's going to be the one that's doing it. Yeah, because he spends a lot of time over there. And Tyler has a very robust training program. They have a conference that was in Indianapolis this past year. Nita could speak to that, but it's by far, it's one of the best things that I've seen. Everybody from the whole country comes in. And so there is that opportunity for those that need specialized training to get it, but in-house, we are going to have our own train the trainer type situation.
Thank you.
Yep. It's very important. It's a good question too. We're not dealing just with this cost, we're fixing the structure of what it needs to function for years to come and address it. We're going to do the updates ourselves. Yes, Ms. Andrade.
Would public offenders and the attorneys be involved with this software?
To a degree. The public defenders are going to be in there, but the private attorneys will get information from it, but they're not necessarily going to interact. There's a new law that started last year called e-file for the civil cases. That is how they interact with the system. So Tyler makes the product that draws from that submission of e-file and puts it right into the Tyler system now. That's been one of the problems we've had is that our court view system didn't talk to anything. It barely talked to itself. So we could, the integrations to go into that Tyler product to go in, you know, for just what we're saying for e-file, you couldn't do it. It was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and they could never get it to work. So in this case, we've had to basically scrap everything and move with the company that had the best product and the state of Illinois is using for all these integration tools. There's another one coming for probation where they're going to be, the state wants to draw out the offender information for probation and kind of monitor what's going on. Well, that's a Tyler product as well. So that was another reason we went with the probation module, because we'd have to pay for that integration if we had somebody else's. So it's a lot of moving parts. It was a good question though. Yeah. Any other questions?
Good question.
Yeah. All right. Roll call vote.
Mr. Hess. Aye. Mr. Tholen. Aye. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Andrade.
Aye.
Mr. Ashcraft. Ms. Monday.
Aye.
Ms. Rittman-McEmmey.
Aye.
Mr. Scanlon. Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Now the work begins. Like Mr. Hunter said, we're going to start on this process. It's about 18 months max. So mid FY 24. That's kind of when I expect us to hit the ground running. So, and there'll be bugs to work out. So we'll get updates in the Criminal Justice Committee meeting from time to time when there's new things to report. We'll make sure we keep everybody involved. It's a big spend. It's a lot of money, but these things are expensive. Software is expensive when you're talking about the type of solution that we had in front of us. I guess for this ARPA funding request, do we want to, anybody want to consider these separately? This is a consent agenda, so we can hear each one of them individually, these next items on the agenda, or we can process them as consent. So if you want to pull one off and talk about it. So you make the motion? Let's see if anybody wants to pull one off first, and then we'll do a consent motion. Second time, is any one of these want to come off? All righty. Mr., you have a motion to approve the consent agenda for ARPA funds as presented. Mr. Fairfield?
Polk.
Featherfield? I just did it again. We all do it now. I think I've created something here. Mr. Featherling with the motion. Sorry. All right, we can read him in the record then.
Authorizing expenditure from fiscal year 2022 Fund 95 for the following: More Hair, Grow Hair Incorporated, St. Patrick Gymnasium, New Beginnings for Cats, and Good Shepherd Manor.
Me too.
Do you have any affiliation with More Hair, Grow Hair, Mr. Hunter?
I'd like to.
I was gonna say, you might have to recuse yourself from voting here.
Recipient, yeah.
All righty, we have the motion in a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess. Aye. Mr. Tholen. Ms. Pope.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield. Aye. Mr. Carrico. Aye. Mr. Eckhoff. Aye. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Andrade.
Aye.
Mr. Ashcraft. Ms. Monday.
Aye.
Ms. Rittman-McEmmey.
Aye.
Mr. Scanlon. Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye, motion carries. We have a few openings.
One opening on the Momentum and Yellowhead Drainage District number 1, one opening on the Mantino Drainage District number 3, one opening on the McGilvery Special Drainage District.
Thank you. Under new business, we could get the title of this read in, please.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding State's Attorney Appellate Prosecutor Program fiscal year 2022.
Is there a motion on that to start? Mr. Eckhoff, a second. Mr. Seroy, basically it's a safety net for if we need an attorney for the appellate courts or any other specific case. It's a cheap solution that we do every year, and we realize that we were advised that we hadn't done it this year, so that's why it's on the special agenda in this one. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess. Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes. Mr. Seroy. Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Parker. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Kirko. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra. Mr. Hunter. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Foster. Ms. Andrade. Mr. Ashcraft. Ms. Monday. Ms. Rittman-McEmmey. Mr. Scanlon. Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Let's see here. Title of the next one, the contract.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, authorizing the chairman of the Kankakee County Board to sign a collective bargaining agreement between Kankakee County and the Teamsters Union, Local 705.
Is there a motion to start with? Ms. Parker?
Polk.
Dr. Polk on the second. If you look in your packet, it kind of lays out some of the highlights on that. It's 2.5, 2.5, 2.5 as far as the percentage increases. And they did some things with longevity. So it's in the packet here. Let me find the exact one. Wes, do you have any comment? I don't know if he's in the back. No. Seems like we had a very, we talked about this in the finance meeting before. We had a very good, productive session, I believe. And if anybody has any comment that was on that team, be happy to hear it. But otherwise, $100 per month for 10 years and $150 per month at 15 years was the longevity. So 2 promotions. We had lead mechanic 1 from mechanic 1 to lead mechanic, and custodian to mechanic 1. So basically, first year the increase is about $35,720 and $14,000, almost $15,000 the following year, and a little over $15,000 the next year. So again, when we approve the levy, that's what that goes to approve, is the pay increases basically. We don't ask for much more than that. Let's see, and then the on-call pay is $55 to $85 per week for the mechanics, because believe me, they get called out. And that term is a 3-year term. So any questions? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hess. Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes. Mr. Seroy. Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Parker. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Kirko. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra. Mr. Hunter. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Foster. Ms. Andrade. Mr. Ashcraft. Ms. Monday. Ms. Rittman-McEmmey. Mr. Scanlon. Ms. Turner. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Alrighty, so any more new or old business before we go on to other business? Any more new or old? Yes, Mr. Snipes.
I want to deal with the old because I guess it's already done. I am looking at the county board members' committee appointments. And I noticed that the 2 people that voted no for the chairman were placed down to 1 committee each. Now, because I represent 18 and the other individual can represent himself, I need to know under what authority, because it's supposed to be with the consent of the county board. When did we approve this? Because I don't see it in any of my particular records with the consent of the county board. Number 2, to reduce the committee meetings means that because we have no salary per se here, which is something that I think that the county board would have needed, whether it was $3,500, $2,500, whatever you want to do per county board member, it hasn't been done. So their compensation is attached to whatever meetings that they attend. Given that we had 3 and the county board, that's 4. There is an issue as to 1, retaliation, but number 2, under the Illinois Constitution and the Supreme Court and the Attorney General's opinion, do you have the authority to basically do such. And in their opinion, it says no. So I guess you can see if we need to maneuver, but I am going to ask, because you all have been provided an attorney in the past, and I believe the issue need to go to court on these two county board members, not only in retaliation, but also in violation of the Constitution, not only of 1870, but the 1970 Constitution. The case law is so eloquently laid out in the Illinois Attorney General's opinion on June 23rd, 1972. So I'm asking if the state's attorney's office would invoke, well, kind of look at the decision on June 23rd, 1972. And then I'm asking that we file an injunction in the court to basically state that this is, one, not done in concert with our own policies, and certainly we have no other justification than retaliation, and we can definitely make a strong case in that regard, whether we look at Kimberly Hudson, whether we look at Janet Peterson, whether we look at Kirstra, whether we look at myself, and I believe there's one other. So we need to now move, because you are our attorneys, to move into litigation if this administration continues, or stands by what I see here as far as committees. I'm going to say that it's not only discriminatory in nature, but I'm going to also say it's retaliatory, and I'm going to say that it's not in accordance with the Supreme Court, who in this particular case, in about a 9-page opinion, has so eloquently laid out. So based upon that particular information, I am, as a county board member, and Mr. Kircher can join in if you would so choose, but we're asking for this to go into the courts and for the judges to, if it has to, assign attorneys and let us deal with litigation, because I believe this is mere retaliation, period. Never had it, and I've been here, I'm the only member that's been here every decade. In the 1990s I served, 2000s I served, 2010 I served, 2020 I have served, and that means I've served under many county board chairmen. Never have any garbage like this has ever happened. So in retaliation, I am saying that we need to basically challenge this in court based upon the information that I do have, and I'll be more than glad to allow the state's attorney at that particular time, if he so chooses, his designee, to examine that Attorney General's opinion as we move forward. Thank you.
Is there any other old business or new business? All right. Final item on the agenda for adjournment. If we can get the title read in the record, please.
Authorization of the release of the request for proposal regarding the social programming grants.
All right, and is there a motion to approve releasing this? Go with Mr. Seroy and Mr. Hunter with the second. You see the terms and everything that's in this proposal, if you will. We've talked about it. We've had a community-wide needs assessment performed to identify the things that everybody thinks that we should be attacking. Then we designed a NOFO, notice of funding opportunity, to let those social service providers in the area partner and apply to best target those 4 areas that we had listed in, that's in the document itself. So the timeline is in there as well. I was trying to thumb through and find it. You've got it sitting there? Okay. I'll make sure we get that out there, because that was, there we go. So we're looking at, we release it today, it'll be on the website. We're gonna put the ad in the newspaper along with the community needs assessment, so there's the 2 documents are right there with each other. So the proposals are due on January 16th by the end of business. The next day, we're gonna open them in Community Services Committee. We're not gonna debate or talk about them, because there's gonna be, the team has been formed of board members that is going to interview and evaluate these and score these proposals, because part of this is also the scoring rubric, so it's completely documentable about how this was funded and something else wasn't funded, if you will, if that ends up being the case. But then between the 30th and February 10th is when that evaluation team will meet and do those interviews. February 28th, the evaluation of the top rank organization, they'll be sent to the executive committee, and that's where we will vote at executive and send that to the full board. So again, every board member has a chance to vote on everything that comes through this board, which is not disenfranchisement. And that's about, the timetable is that's about it. So this is the culmination of, again, of a lot of work, but then a new process begins. So, I'm sorry, someone had their hand up. I apologize, Mr. Hunter.
Chairman, you mentioned singular newspaper. Will you open that up to the city news and?
Oh, that's what I was referring to, was the city
Okay.
news. Yeah.
Okay, good enough.
So, any other questions? This is exciting. This is, we're looking, I'm sorry, Mr.
Can we
Hunter.
get copies of these so we can pass them out to the community-based organizations and 501c3s?
Well, yeah, but I really think they should be pulling them off our website.
Yeah, they could.
Yeah, that's, you know, we can give them, we can do a cut sheet maybe on the details, but they really should have the needs assessment and this, and together they can craft the best document possible.
Okay.
But we'll definitely, if there's some copies you need, we'll make a couple copies for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Since, now, and by the way, we're gonna be going to finance to approve the amount of money in this document. It's 2 million of what we set aside for all of those funding opportunities, but we'll approve that as the next step. But this is gonna be out there, and by the time that these come back in, we'll have the amount of money approved as far as what the finance committee and the full board thinks that we should be doing on the total amount. We've operated with 2 million as the number for so long. We need to get this out there. So, any other thoughts, questions? Mr. Snipes?
I just wanted to make sure that the, Mr. Coughlin had the file number up under William J. Scott, Attorney General. The file number is S486. Thank you, sir.
What does that have to do with this? Nothing. So anyway, we had a motion, a second. Roll call vote? Thank you.
Mr. Hess. Aye. Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk. Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber. Aye. Mrs. Parker. Mr. Fairfield. Aye. Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Aye. Mr. Featherling. Aye. Mr. Dunhill. Aye. Mr. Miller. Aye. Mr. Long. Aye. Mr. Kirkstra. Aye. Mr. Hunter. Aye. Mr. Smith. Aye. Mr. Hildebrand. Aye. Ms. Foster. Aye. Ms. Andrade. Aye. Mr. Ashcraft. Aye. Ms. Monday. Aye. Ms. Ripman-Ekemi. Aye. Mr. Scanlon. Aye. Ms. Turner. Aye. Ms. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Mr. Hess, please. Second, we're with Mr. Seroy. All those in favor say aye. Aye.